What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the microcast. I think it's been a month
Ooh,
since we did our last episode, and my God, I can't believe it's been a month already.
I can. Jesus
That
Christ.
can't be true. No way.
I feel
My
it.
gosh. Well, we're recording at 5:30 on a Saturday night, so it's been busy.
It's getting crazy over here.
Well, welcome back. Thanks for being patient with us on today's episode, obviously hosted by me and by Zoe.
Yeah, and
Same as always.
same but different. On this week's episode, we're going to warm up with our go-to hot or not topics. I'm really stoked on this week's. Our takes on things like foam rolling, training peaks, flat coke, and our favorite influencer. So I think it'll be really fun, a lot to chew on here.
Oh, man. We're going to get into discussion around managing life stress in the context of training. And we're also going to talk about preparing for races that you're on the wait list for. And we'll probably wrap it up. I think we're going to have time for this, but we're going to get into the most essential aspects of the coach athlete relationship. And you never know how things are going to go. This could be our last podcast of 2023. So we wanted to pack in as much fun take home information for you guys as possible. So hope you enjoy.
Yeah. But maybe we can squeeze in a last year-end podcast. That could be fun too.
You
We'll
just
try our
never
best.
know.
You
just
never know.
I don't want to put that pressure on myself, but yes, I want to. Hey, if you're an athlete who's dreaming big for 2024, thinking about, just saying end of year coming up, big goals for next year, you want to take your commitment to your training and your goals to the next level. If you're looking for more support in your running journey, reach out to us. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to see what we can do to support you and your journey.
Yeah. So I'm really psyched for this week's hot or not topics, but I'm going to toss it to you first, TJ. Hot or not foam rolling?
Hot or not, foam rolling.
What do you think? What's your takeaway?
I'm hot on it.
Tell me why.
On it. I just, it's kind of like a nice time to, this is my personal experience, but it's nice for me to, get on the ground, focus in on my breathing, kind of like check in with my body, do a little bit of rolling out those sore spots, kind of see where they're at. Not a ton of research to back up.
Yeah, the evidence is pretty mixed on foam rolling.
Yeah.
That being said, though, it's a tough intervention to test because you can't have a double blind study because people know if they're foam rolling or not. Like there's not like you can't do a double blind. People know what the intervention is. So it's really hard to test that out on people because when in the studies that have been done, people tend to report that when they foam roll, they feel like there's more mobility. They'll feel less soreness, things like that. I'll say anecdotally, I struggle with some non-running related back issues. I have scoliosis and an extra rib and just a generally kind of messed up skeleton.
You got some stuff going on.
So I'm kind of a biomechanical nightmare. I remember seeing an x-ray of my back and ribs for the first time. And I was like, oh dear God, that just looks like a ball of yarn. It's not good.
You're all wound up.
Just all wound up. Just the hunchback with anyway, so that is why I like to foam roll. I feel like it does sort of help me sometimes crack my vertebrae and get everything mobile there, especially if I've been sitting all day. It can help me open my chest and take, just sort of breathe more deeply and take that mindful moment. As a coach, I will tell people to foam roll some things, but there's also I think the most common mistake I see with foam rolling is people that have IT band and knee issues. They'll try to roll right on the tendon, and that can actually just aggravate the tendon. So I will say, if you're struggling with a niggle or some sort of injury, the best thing to do isn't always to just go ham on the foam roller.
Yeah, I agree. And it's always good to keep it light. There is some research out there that suggests that keeping the fascia loose can be helpful. I do think, there's always that fine line that runners are playing between having the right amount of tension to have good running economy and to feel quick and to be firing, and then being too loose and then kind of just being slow as a result of that.
Yeah. And I have seen, and I have been that person. For me, it's usually the massage gun, but I've definitely had an athlete or two go a little too hard on the foam roller and end up sort of exacerbating an issue or just making themselves really sore. So I would say if you are trying to foam roll to help address a specific imbalance or point of discomfort, talk to a PT and at least give it a quick Google, and don't just like sit down on the ground and start rolling up a storm.
Yeah, no need to lean in and hammer on those
No.
areas that are super sore unless maybe you've been directed by
Yeah, don't do
a
that.
professional to do so.
Yeah,
Let's talk about training peaks, hot
let's
or
do it.
not.
I'm hot. I really like it. Now that we've been coaching on it for, I mean, you've been coaching me on it sort of like as a learning mechanism for a few months now. I really like it because I think it helps me. There's some things I don't like about it, to be clear. I'm not really looking at athletes' fitness score, fatigue score, but it does help me more easily see when people are missing runs and why they're missing runs. And it helps me see if there's a red flag that might mean I need to get into someone's log and address their training load more easily.
I think it's definitely a bit more efficient on the coaching side of
Yeah.
things and helpfully compartmentalized. I, we were very much against, I use a lot of hesitation and pausing there because I'm like, were we against it or
We
were
weren't against it. We just
had,
weren't sure it was the best tool for us. And I
well,
think that we've also, had to like help retrain a lot of athletes who are too focused on the wrong data. Not all data is useful and actionable, and it's a skill to learn how to find the signal in the noise. And particularly for new runners, and particularly for the type of new runner who immediately gets excited, buys a pair of Alpha Flies and picks up the latest issue of Runner's World and decides that like they're going to start taking ketones even though they're only running 15 miles a week. Like that is a type of person that you have to really help coach around what data is actionable and useful and what data is extraneous and distracting.
well, and I'll tell you just to kind of play off what you just mentioned there, but we use Google spreadsheets for a long time and were pretty adamant that that was, the right tool for us, even moving forward as we were, changing our coaching system and structure at Microcosm. The fact of the matter is, in Google spreadsheets, you have a lot more control over the data, and Training Peaks really complicates that, especially with people's watches.
Mm.
The athlete can actually pull over more information than the coach thinks is useful. And so there's some nuance there. But I would say overall, I'm really excited about using that platform. And, I've most of our coaching team has been using it for 2 months now
Yeah.
because everybody started to transition over in October, and we've got almost half of our 200 plus person team, and across, 8-9 different coaches moving on to the platform. And we've seen that the friction there, why I am hot on this is because that friction that was there before, when it was difficult for athletes to check in, provide that necessary feedback, now they are doing that on their phones. It's much more convenient.
Right.
They're getting that information to us in a more timely manner, which is important in the coaching process.
And I feel like it makes it much easier to contextualize a day and contextualize trends. You can more immediately see an athlete's chronic load, their acute training load, and their ramp rate. So like if you have an athlete, like previously, let's say I had someone programmed 4 weeks out, but then they miss a week of training because they had a cold and their kid got sick and they couldn't run or something. Then that means I need to like essentially retool that whole second week. But if they didn't check in, it's much harder for me to get a clear picture of how much load was lost and how I can redistribute that to ramp them back into training. And so this tool helps me better see week to week, like, okay, you did this many miles last week. Here's how many miles we should be doing this week. And then what that means for the next like 2, 3, maybe even 6 weeks. Whereas like in Sheets, it was kind of a bit more, you had to really, there's maybe a bit more, there wasn't as hard a data point there.
Well,
or I would have to go back in and manually count up like, okay,
right,
he did 4 miles this day, 2 miles the next day. Whereas with Training Peaks, you can immediately be like, oh, great, he did 25 miles last week. Perfect. We'll get him into 30.
Well, I just have to say, I think there's probably a lot of coaches out there who are still using Sheets. And to be quite honest, we still have athletes who did not want to transition over to Training Peaks for whatever reason. And that's fine. but there's not a lot of coaches out there using Training Peaks who are going to be as diligent as you and I and are going to add up that volume by time or mileage, however, you're counting it with the athletes, to see what that ramp rate is and to see whether or not, this week is an appropriate match for what the athlete did last week. It's just, most coaches aren't going to do that. They're going to take the easy route. They're going to just be like, okay, I'll move this here, move that there, and I think it should be fine. And then, hope for the best. And, I love Training Peaks for the reason that it kind of holds me a bit more accountable. Not that I was doing that, but it gives me the numbers and removes a point of friction, so that if ever it was like, you have to like ask for the ramp rate, it's like, no, like I can see week to week and the historical tracking. I actually used to go to Strava for a lot of that.
Yeah,
really
I would have to like
athletes
stalk athletes on Strava, and not all athletes were on Strava. So I'd be like, all right, homegirl's got to like go in and manually count up, what this guy should have done, what he actually did. And I just really like having a tool that also just helps me more immediately see compliance being that this person hit more or less the prescribed volume, because that wasn't something that our original system allowed.
No, it's not possible to do that in spreadsheets.
So yeah, and being able, and we can be alerted if someone isn't running. Previously, it was really hard to know, like if someone just drops off the face of the earth and stops running, I would have no way of knowing that if the athlete didn't reach out. And a lot of folks, when they drop off the face of the earth like that, there's something going on and it's tough to reach out. So with this new tool, it better equips me to be the intervention when someone's having a tough time, when they're sick, when they're struggling. If an injury occurs, I can initiate and I can immediately reduce volume rather than putting the onus on the athlete to reach out. It is a two-way street, and we'll get into that when we talk about communication later today. But I like having that level of agency to be able to initiate conversations with the athlete.
Right. And sometimes, especially if it's a newer relationship with an athlete, the coach does kind of have the responsibility of taking more of the reins on that. Rather, if you've been working with an athlete for several years, you guys, you have a stronger relationship. They have more of a foundation and understanding of what they're doing. They can practice more independence in that process, make some of those decisions more autonomously. But, with the majority of folks coming through that year to 18 months range, they're not really quite ready to exercise that. And Training Peaks does give the coach an advantage. So I'm really hot on it right now.
Same.
I think that, check in with me in 6 months to a year to, when I've really gotten familiar with all of the nuances and the, the little kind of nooks and crannies of what is possible. But I think the coolest thing for me that I like the most is I no longer have to go to Strava to check on my athletes, like actually like what paces they are running, what effort level they're running at for how long, and to like really have that historical workout data.
Yeah.
It's so nice to have it in one app, and it kind of actually like surprises me a little bit when there's coaches who like coach elites who like don't have it in one space.
Yeah, I particularly like being able to look at the breakdowns of my particularly more advanced athletes' workouts, seeing what their exact splits were, making sure they're pretty consistent and even. Love seeing those little tabletops.
Yeah.
Nothing gives my heart more joy than that.
Right? My gosh. It's kind of made the coaching process more fun recently.
Yeah, I would agree. I love a good chart.
You love a good tabletop.
I love a good tabletop.
What do you think about flat Coke? Do you love that?
All about it, baby. Like,
you're hot on that?
So hot. If I could pull into a gas station and get a flat Coke, I would.
I think it's disgusting.
What?
Yeah.
Why?
I need those bubbles.
No, and when you're running though?
Yeah, heck yeah. Give me some bubbles.
No, but like especially when you're running at altitude, do you ever get like the pipe bomb flask where it's like you're running and you're jostling and like it starts like and you bite into it and it just like annihilates your face with Coke bubbles?
I never use Coke as a replacement for my tried and true nutrition plan.
I love Coke.
Shout out
races.
Fly Nutrition.
Yeah. Well, shout out also Fly Nutrition. I love me some Coke. Yeah. So there's a fun story. We were Trail Runner collaborated with the running brand Satisfy based out of France to make what for legal reasons we can't call flat Mexican Coke, but is essentially Mexican Coke with like the good actual like sugarcane sugar without the bubbles. And I freaking love this stuff. It's got like 70 milligrams of caffeine in it, and it's very sweet, and it is absolutely flat. It tastes like syrup.
I don't like that. Like, in order for it to have the right taste that I'm expecting, it has to have a bubble with it.
I
They go
can't do
hand
the
in
bubbles
hand.
when I'm running. It's
Too
just
many burps.
No, it messes up my flask. Like the amount, like I'm sure whenever it's like such a rookie ultra move, and I don't feel like it's always like I'll like run into some aid station during a race and someone's like 11-year-old kid is working the aid station. I'm like, oh great, perfect, like exactly what I want when I'm cruxing out during a race, and like some child is trying to like carefully pour some like definitely not flat Coke into my flask, and they can't handle the 2-liter thing, and it's super foamy, and they end up like filling up my flask so there's 30% Coke and then like 70% just like foam.
Ugh.
And then I'm like, fuck it, I'm rolling out of here.
See, I just, it's like a shooter. They have those little shot glasses of
I like
Coke.
that too.
Yeah, those definitely made me throw up that lead bill. Yeah, not maybe the right choice at that time for me. That was the last time I've had Coca-Cola.
I love flat Coke. You don't.
No.
Yeah. Well, Flota, look for it at it'll be at Cocodona this year.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Awesome.
And probably at Hard Rock again.
Shoot. That's cool.
Actually, and we even had a Flota vending machine at UTMB this year.
What?
Yeah.
Wow. You guys are... I think there's some money to be made from this venture. How do we become
We
investors?
definitely lost money on Flota.
It's bad marketing.
Yeah.
We got to fix the marketing.
Or we lost Satisfy's money on Flota. So that's fair.
All right. Favorite influencer, friend of microcosm. Just kidding. David Goggins, hot or not?
I'm sure he's fine as a person. I do not personally resonate with his self-narrativization around staying hard and going. I think he leans a little too hard into this like rugged individualist. Everything is up to you. Everything begins and ends with you. There's no such thing as like systemic failures or breakdowns. All your successes and failures are 100% due to things you've done or not done. I think that life is complicated and we're all inextricably bound up in each other and in complex systems. And sometimes you can work really hard and fail for no reason. And sometimes it can be helpful to take more responsibility for things and to assume more agency. But sometimes people do that as a means of responding to an ultimately chaotic and rationless world. And I don't think that's very healthy for people. I particularly think his messaging can really sink its teeth into vulnerable and insecure men who are chronically told by our culture that they have to just like nut up and get things done, and if they don't, then they're not manly enough. And I would rebut that with, no, you don't, and that sometimes things are beyond your control, and that's okay, and that self-compassion is a skill, and that part of toughness can be being soft and acknowledging vulnerabilities and paying attention to your emotions, and can be acknowledging where your limitations begin and end. So I think that, ultimately, I think his messaging is flawed. And I think that sometimes people gravitate towards it because it's a nice message that we can just, take responsibility. And if we just work hard enough and like, don't stop running, then everything will work out. And I don't know, that runs very counter to my experience in this world.
Well, just to push back a little bit, I think personal responsibility is hugely important.
I'm not saying it's unimportant, but it's not the only factor that matters.
It is not the only contributing factor, but the factors that matter are the factors that I think are most relevant to you and your experience. And I think what's flawed about the David Goggins influencer thing is he uses his N of one experience to tell people what is best for them. And that is where the issue lies.
Correct.
And I think when you really zoom out, shout out to Brad Stolberg and Steve Magnus, some of their work, which we are obviously big fans of. You guys already know that. When we really look at like resilience and grit and that mindset, it's a much more multifaceted, way of being to end up being that gritty persona that, David Goggins is advocating for. And you want to be gritty. You want to have resilience, especially when we look at athletics or any part of human existence, right? We're all confronted by challenges. But I think the vast majority of the research suggests that there are many different tools. Sometimes you need to be hard. Sometimes you need to be soft. Sometimes you need to be thoughtful.
I'm not saying that he's never right. I'm just saying that like his whole vision of the world is myopic, and he doesn't assert that things are complicated and you have to assess the situation and then decide if self-compassion or toughness is the correct tool for you. He sort of asserts that you should just barrel forward yelling, "Stay hard," whether your femur is broken or not. And I don't think that that is helpful. And I think it preys on people who already intuitively feel that they're not enough, so that they'll buy another audiobook, they'll buy another workout routine, they'll buy another like man protein shake, and, essentially buy into a self-help industry that preys on all of our insecurities.
I totally agree with you.
I'm just always skeptical of memoirs that have like actionable takeaways. Like, people's lives are cool and interesting, but I think they are not always should be like boiled down to lessons for other people.
Well, again, it kind of goes to me and like, oh, it's that N of one experience, like if, for example, you're working with an athlete and they're asking you about your personal experience, you're as a coach going to instinctively go to a parallel experience, if one is available, that has takeaways that make sense for that athlete. And, as a coach, those kind of takeaways are not going to necessarily be myopic.
Right.
They're going to be much more broad and usually probably draw on several different possibilities.
I do always try to be really clear when I'm sharing my own firsthand experience. Like, oh, hey, I have this similar experience. I'm not saying that this is how things will go for you, and maybe this won't even resonate with you. I'm only sharing it so it can be an invitation to consider that there might be other options or other ways available. It's always an invitation or a challenge. I'm never trying to posit, like, I feel like I've rarely done something in life, and then when I've done it, I'm like, fuck yeah, I was right. Like, this is the way. Everyone should do this. Like, I just never felt that.
Okay, listeners, spend a day in our house. Zoe's always right in our house.
Yeah, but I never tell you to do what I do.
True.
I'm always like kind of a hot mess, and I'm never like, oh yeah, I'm eating cottage cheese in the bathtub. This is a way of life other people should emulate.
It's a way of life for you that works with you.
Yeah, it's my way of life.
Talk a little bit more about
cheese life.
Life stress soon. It's almost a great segue over, but I feel like we've kind of exhausted this conversation about David Goggins. I'm not hot on his rhetoric.
For me, I'm ending in a compassionate place. If I understand why that exists, his experience is valid. And I would just challenge anyone who really resonates with that vision of the world to explore why and what other ways of being that are softer and more open might be available to you.
Especially if you're a guy.
Yeah, this is an invitation to all the men of the endurance world. You don't need to slide into my DMs to tell me to stay hard.
It's a process for us guys to embrace our more soft sides.
I agree. And I'd be curious how you think about this. I think it's gotten better, but I feel that a lot of men have been let down by our culture, and there aren't a ton of role models and examples that resonate with a modern male way of being.
Well, I think if you take anybody who is probably 30 plus years old, they've grown up, especially in athletics, in a world dominated by that
the stay hard mentality.
Yeah. And if you're soft, you're not enough.
Yeah.
You don't have what it takes. A lot of coaches perpetuated that forward in youth sports to kids. I know that for a long time that was, I remember a very difficult moment my freshman year of college playing tennis at the ITA championships, and my coach looking at like a Terminator over, like looking through the fence and telling me, "You're a fruity pebble. You're a fruity pebble. You're a fruity pebble."
Oh my God. What the hell?
I was just like, okay.
Oh my God.
And like Oh man, we tanked the match super
I
hard.
bet you did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Because like threatening people's like gender identity is never no one like when people are under threat, they're not like, yeah, now I feel really excited to perform to my potential.
well, just
But
to
like that's been how we've treated men for so long.
and unfortunately, men in position of power in athletics have perpetuated that forward. I was really fortunate to only have to serve under that coach for 1 year.
Yeah.
And then afterwards had a much more compassionate and a softer approach coach. And like, of course, he held us to standards, and there was consequences when we didn't uphold our commitments. And all of these important aspects of a coach athlete relationship, especially with the team. But there was much more room for the full spectrum of emotions that we're supposed to have as people. So I think in men's sports, that is the default, and it's taking time for that kind of approach to weed its way out.
Yeah, which is wild because all of the evidence is showing that what was previously considered a stereotypically feminine way of leading, that's what the evidence tends to validate, is much more primacy on feeling, on listening, on tools of self-compassion, on mental flexibility, psychological flexibility, identity flexibility. It's sort of like one of our favorite mutual movies is Whiplash, about this jazz instructor who is just a hard ass and is really mean, throws instruments at people, calls people like straight up slurs. And there is like, I understand that as someone who really wants to be excellent at things, we've all seen sort of that image of like, this guy's only tough because he cares. And I think that there is a part of a lot of people who tend to be hard on themselves, that like when they see their own self-talk reflected in another person, they're going to gravitate towards that because it can actually be pretty easy for them. But then there's sort of been this newer image of the male leader. I'm thinking of like a Ted Lasso, that's a lot more based in the evidence. And so I am optimistic because I do feel like our culture in terms of like both fictional stories and real stories, we're starting to see that there are multiple ways of being, multiple ways of leading, multiple ways of listening. And I'm really buoyed by that.
Me too. Whiplash is such a good movie.
Whiplash is such a good movie. And Ted Lasso is a great TV show.
I mean, when I first saw Ted Lasso, I was like, wow, this is validating to me, because this is the part of coaching that I lean into the most, maybe a little too much. So I've been criticized in my coaching for not holding people accountable enough. And it's something that I've been consistently trying to improve on. So I do think like there are ways to hold people accountable to commitments, to agreements, to standards that can be respectful, but also be firm, but not
lovingly firm.
Yes. And, I think justifying like a hard man's approach to a coach athlete relationship by saying, well, it's because I love you or because I care, is kind of a cop out, in my opinion.
Totally. It is, because you're not at all taking into account, and like every coach, and we'll touch on this later, but you have to tailor your message for each individual. I hold different athletes accountable different ways. When I have an athlete that is struggling with accountability, who gets maybe upset or feels uncomfortable the first time I hold them accountable, I'll often ask them, what does accountability look and feel like to you? And I think that helps me make sure I'm speaking in a language they understand, or it gives me an opportunity to educate them on what accountability tends to look like for me.
I love that. And again, it's because there's kind of a myriad of different ways there's no one way to this one place. There's multiple ways to that same place. And I think, it makes sense to talk a little bit more about the coach athlete relationship now, since we've kind of ended up on this subject. But what you're kind of discussing, to me, you're highlighting some of the essentials that I think that make up the coach athlete relationships. We have communication, we have trust, we have teamwork, and we have the environment. I think those are probably 4 of the more important aspects of the relationship. At least these are the ones that I want to touch on in this conversation. And when we have the hard man coaching approach that to me feels like represents a lack of emotional intelligence and empathy, I think that over time degrades the teamwork aspect of this, and the trust, the environment, and the communication. So it erodes all four of the fundamental essentials or principles of the coach-athlete relationship. So that to me right there, it's taken me 36 years of being an athlete to kind of understand these things.
And you've been coached across multiple sports. You've coached multiple sports yourself. In a former life, you were a tennis pro. So you understand what this looks like in different contexts.
Sure. And a health coach. And it's,
yeah.
like
that's true.
All across the spectrum.
You've been a coach in so many places. I can't even remember them all. But I think, a big sort of like one of the legs of this chair of coaching is communication. What does good communication look like for you in the context of a strong coach-athlete relationship?
As soon as you said strong, I thought about the strong, hard coach man.
strong like the meme of the Mr. Clean art, like that. Yes, that kind of strong, like a good firm handshake.
A firm
or like
handshake.
A hug.
I like a good hug, but we're hands off unless
that's true.
It's mutual.
It's correct. Yeah. We never initiate the hug.
No. Don't initiate the hug.
Yeah. We'll come to you.
Okay. Well, I want to preface this with just a couple things maybe about the coach-athlete relationship. Great. I think the first one is, if this isn't apparent, it should be now, because I'm going to say it. The coach-athlete relationship is the most integral part of the coaching and training process. There is no aspect of the process more important in my mind. It is more important than the plan. It is more important than the days a week you train, the block training schedule you use, the approach.
I can't remember where it was published, but there was that study that showed that even more important than a specific intervention, like training with extra thresholds via the Norwegian method, or doing like a different intensity breakdown, or doing longer runs, the most important part of an athlete's training program was how much they believed in it and how much they trusted their coach.
That is
so that is a part of the training that changes on a physiological and psychological level how athletes will adapt and respond to the training. And that's why these relationships take so like that. Like Eliud Kipchoge has been with his coach for 10 years. And I think that it's shows in his performances and being one of the greatest in the world, because belief and connection, I know it sounds like Marianne Williamson bumper sticker talk, but it is an intervention in training, and it is something that can be performance enhancing.
Absolutely. 100%. It's, to me, at Microcosm with our coaches, what we are teaching and training our coaches is that the coach-athlete relationship is the heart and center of the coaching process.
Yeah.
And to back that up, the coach-athlete relationship is a two-way street. It involves two participants, a coach and an athlete. And it's both a process and a practice that develops over time for both the coach and the athlete, where both parties are expected to engage, interact, and communicate. And that interplay between the two defines the effectiveness of the coaching and ultimately determines the success of the coaching program.
Yeah.
It is the most fundamental aspect of the whole training process. I cannot overstate that. And so, you asked me, okay, communication, why is that important? Or what are the important attributes of communication? And I think when looking at this from both a coach and an athlete perspective, there are maybe 3 or 4 things to highlight in that communication. Communication needs to be clear. It needs to be honest. It needs to be concise. And if you're the coach, that communication always needs to be focused on how can I serve the athlete?
Right.
And so communication, like in any relationship, is basically the foundation of that relationship. You have to be able to talk with people. You have to be able to understand them. You have to be able to communicate clearly your needs, your wants, if you're the athlete, or the coach's needs, wants, expectations. Either way, that's a two-way street. That's the interplay. It goes back and forth. And so if you're going to have maybe like the foundation of the essentials, I believe that communication is like at the bottom. That kind of supports
of the pyramid.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
that supports everything
That feels
else.
right to me. So, and I think this, like, these sort of concepts, I mean, these all are interrelated. But trust is another really critical part of the coach athlete relationship. What does trust look like and mean to you?
Trust in action is the coach feeling like they're able to communicate honestly, and the athlete also feel like they're able to communicate honestly to the coach, in a way that, is respectful and empathetic, compassionate, but also is meant to serve both
Right.
parties in the relationship. Because where a mistake that I see a lot of coaches make is they please, and they're like yes men,
Yeah.
and they say yes to everything because they're afraid if they say no or they set a boundary, they're going to upset their athletes' feelings. And I've been on the receiving end of this with athletes, where I've had athletes, tell me after a time, like, oh, I was just telling you things in the training log in our conversations that you wanted to hear. And I'm like, well, we completely have, we have missed so many marks in the coach athlete relationship, and you have those experiences and you go back and you think, okay, how do we build on this? Because truly we can't have an effective training process whatsoever if there's no trust. You need to know that the athlete's getting the work done. And, thankfully with tools like Training Peaks, you can see that much more easily. But without that, the likelihood of the training being successful is very, very small.
Right. And I think such a key component of trust is that it takes time to nurture and cultivate. It's not something that you can just dive into like a couple days in. And I think that's one of the many reasons that we want people to commit to a longer term relationship when they sign up with Microcosm, is because it takes time to do these things and to build the relationship in a way that actually serves the athlete's long-term goals and needs. And so that's a thing that we always point to when it comes to like, well, why do I need to be coached for a year? And it's like, well, work that's worth doing requires this level of time. Building any sort of meaningful relationship requires time. It requires hours and hours. And that's on both of us. It takes time from both of us.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You said that so well. And I think if we continue to look at like the pyramid where you have communication and trust, it's like, well, how do we create trust? It starts with all of those small interactions. It starts with the way both parties show up, and how both parties, communicate. But I think also there is a direct role that the coach can play in creating that trust, and that's through environment. And that's why I believe environment is one of the essentials in the coach athlete relationship. You, as a coach, and there is interplay here. This is still a two-way street,
right?
But the coach is the main facilitator because the athlete is coming to the coach for something specific,
right?
Although the coach's needs in the relationship, a coach gets a lot of personal satisfaction when an athlete does well and when an athlete succeeds.
Right.
So it is very important for the athlete to succeed in order for the coach to feel like they are doing a good job. And that is a need that most coaches have, that fulfills something for the coach, because yes, there is a financial component to this. And I do believe coaches should be paid well for the work that they do. Supporting people is a very hard job. And, quite honestly,
people should just be compensated for labor is a wild idea that I have that I know is a hot take, because every time I used to tweet that people should be paid to do work, it would get fucking shot down by a whole bunch of dude bros on the internet. But that's my soapbox.
Well, let's not digress.
But like, I mean, to be fair, also, like, we're not just, we're not just keyboard monkeys. Like, we are pursuing continuing education. We are consistently educating ourselves and listening to podcasts and like right now, like next to the screen we're recording this in, I have a study pulled up about LEA and female trail runners and ultra runners. So like, we're doing the work.
Of course. And I think most athletes are coming around to understand that coaching demands a certain price point.
Have you ever paid like $10 for a haircut?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't want a bad haircut.
Right. Okay, great. That's worse. The point I was getting to. Yeah.
Well, so the point I made about, the relationship, there is a financial component to this. This is a service that the coach provides, but it's a service the coach provides. And so when we look at, okay, what are the responsibilities of the coach? The athlete is going to be thinking like the coach needs to provide this environment. I don't think that they're wrong in that. And there are certain things that a coach should be doing to help facilitate that is right. Part of the transaction. It's, there's a financial component. Yes. But I think most coaches, the coaches that are good in this industry, are doing it because when they hit all of these essentials and the athlete has success, they get the satisfaction and personal fulfillment from that. And that is worth, something much more, I think, at least for me, more than the financial component.
Totally. And to be clear, that satisfaction isn't just race results. I think often, like when TJ comes to me and he's excited about a day that he just had coaching, it's because someone had a breakthrough and they were able to run pain-free. They were able to run without pressure that they were put on themselves. They were able to run in a more liberated manner. They were able to accept their body. They were able to run slow without being hard on themselves. They were able to run, the longest they ever had on a Saturday. They were able to get 5 runs in a week for the first time. Like, so often when we talk about like successes, I'm not thinking about finish lines. I'm thinking about those little moments that are so meaningful to the athlete that will never end up on Strava, will never end up on Instagram, but they are the mortar of what keeps a coach and an athlete together.
100%. And I love the full spectrum of ways to celebrate that because like achievement isn't just in like a literal finish line that you get to cross. Quite honestly, it's in like all of the small actions that you fulfilled in order to get to that finish line. If you're still the athlete that is, working on putting together the habits and the routine, I mean, there's successes to be highlighted there. And it's just like, that's why I love as a coach, and we talk about environment. Okay. Safe spaces, obviously rule number 1 under that, but part of the environment is the coach plays an integral role in creating that positive, enthusiastic, motivating space. And I'm always thinking about my ABCs, always be celebrating. Like even if it's the smallest possible thing here, what can we accentuate that shows the athlete like they are making progress, they are doing things that over time are going to add up. And the coach's job is to facilitate that. And so that environment essential is really key. Athletes need to feel seen and heard in there. Coaches also need to feel like they can share and feel comfortable sharing, especially when feedback can be challenging. Holding athletes accountable is hard. Coaches are often very empathetic people, and so they know that sometimes they'll say things that can provoke an emotional response in an athlete. That's very difficult part of the process. Challenging feedback is hard. But how do we continue to build communication, trust, environment, communication that's respectful? So important, but I love that, like, always be celebrating, hit those small things, because the positivity, the energy, the grit, the resilience, that a lot of that comes out of the environment. And quite honestly, if we go bigger, the culture of the entire coaching organization.
Right. And, we've talked about trying to build a culture of excellence in previous episodes. And I think that's also so core to what we do, and rooting community in values. Again, like, all of this stuff is backed by evidence and is just a really core part of what we do as coaches. And we're always increasingly trying to make sure our systems and daily interactions are more in alignment with that.
So lastly, before we move on, teamwork. For me, in the coaches at Microcosm, I think that's kind of at the peak of the pyramid.
Right.
You're establishing this foundation, communication, environment, and trust. And then that all leads to having the coach athlete relationship, like the teamwork that makes the dream like literally work. And it kind of sounds ridiculous to say that. I never thought I'd say
Not
that.
as ridiculous as that hand motion you're making.
It's better than this one for YouTube.
Teamwork. You're hearing it more and more. It's very good. I walked in that team and I said, great work.
Anything with the hands. You don't want to look like Trump.
No, it's not good.
But what does teamwork mean to you? The two-way street that exists between the coach and athlete.
For me, what comes to mind is you and I took a swing dancing lesson in Denver a few weeks ago. And in swing dancing, there's a leader and a follower. And it's not that the follower is just like a rag doll being tossed around by the leader. The leader is indicating with their body movements where they want the follower to go, and the follower is reading and responding to that. And that's how I think coaching is. It's a dance where someone might be indicating the direction we're going, but you're not just like yanking someone around. You're indicating, I think this is the best way for us to go right now. You're not just like trying to toss someone, and you're collaborating. You're building something together in the moment. You're always trying to read each other with openness, honesty, and trying to read in the most sort of like open-hearted way possible. And for me, teamwork is a lot about making sure I'm understanding the athlete and deep listening.
I love the mention of listening. I think that really plays into communication. Communication is verbal and nonverbal. And certainly, an aspect of teamwork. When I think about the two-way street, I think about both people doing the work. I feel like it's a common misconception that the coach, you sign up for coaching, and that is going to be the differential for you. But your success as an athlete is by and large a direct result of whether or not you're willing to do the work or not.
Right.
You, as the athlete, you're the one that has to do the work.
Right.
And so, like you mentioned, the coach kind of role in the two-way street is to keep the athlete on the path.
Yes.
And to help them when they go astray.
And to find out from the athlete what path feels best to them, and to use our knowledge to help sort of put bumpers up on that path and guide them along that way. But again, we can't do the runs for the athlete. We can't do the race for the athlete. We can't pick the race schedule for the athlete. I can't do the PT for the athlete. So I think it's really about listening and making sure we understand where they want to go, and then to the best of our capability, explaining how they can get there.
Absolutely. And providing that blueprint. That's one of my favorite things in coaching is providing that long-term blueprint. Okay, we're here. You want to get to here. Here are the things we need to do along the way to get you from where you are to where you want to go. And then if I'm lucky, the athlete gets to where they want to go. And if I've done a really good job and they continue to be engaged, we can take that as a new place and then expand on that. And it's a never-ending process in my mind. I mean, I've been with my coach for 6 years, and it's a never-ending process.
Right.
Which is, for me, I'm like, I kind of lighting up on the inside right now because it's so freaking fun. All the possibilities for creation.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about stress.
Woo! Stress. It's kind of the water I swim in.
So, for those of you guys out there who don't know, Zoe is doing a TV show for Outside, and it's called The Outside Show.
Yeah.
And this has involved, which maybe is one of the contributing factors to our month hiatus from a new episode going live, but that for you to be involved in the show as a producer and talent, which is an actor as well as a writer, you commute to Denver every Sunday, and every Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, you commute back to Carbondale.
Sure do.
Which is a 3-hour drive both ways.
3 hours when things go great. which is not usually how I-70 goes. Dude, it is like, imagine Mad Max in the wintertime, and that's how I-70 typically is. Like, you will see semi trucks turned over on fire. There's like, you'll see like a Honda sedan like pulled off to the side of the road with like a guy just peeing straight out of it. Like stuff that it's the ninth circle of hell.
I think I'd have to take a week's long vacation to be able to handle skier traffic down through the I-70 corridor on a Sunday.
Help and audiobook recommendations.
You're going to need a lot of audiobooks.
Yeah.
So that's objectively hard. And you have definitely been challenged by this.
And to contextualize, I did not quit my job to do this. And I am still coaching.
Right. And again, this has been very challenging.
Would not recommend, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, well, this was a considered decision for you. You're thinking about, future career opportunities and exploring other things that speak to you, that you are really passionate about. And people who listen to this podcast know you are a member of Consensual Improv, which in the Roaring Fork Valley is a very successful
best improv group in our whole valley.
Might be best in Colorado. I don't know, but I'm just saying, I'm a huge fan. But you've been involved in these other things, and you're exploring. This is kind of like playing into the stuff that we talk a lot about with athletes. It's like, figure out your likes and dislikes. Over time, you build on the experiences that you've had. And this is kind of one of those moments where you've been able to do that in your career, but it's also had an impact on your training. And so, there's things going on when you introduce new life stress that impacts training. And you are one of those kind of athletes who still sees the goals for next year. And you're like, how do I push and, to the best of my ability, get myself in a position to still pursue those goals, even though I know, like at least 6 hours of my week now are spent in a car during prime training hours. Like how am I going to work on this? So what are you doing? What strategies to manage that stress have you been thinking about?
Yeah. So, it's been tough. I have not always been the most amazing at listening to my body. So I've had to be really more diligent, because you can't, like, especially with this job, like, you can't feel off and be on camera, like, that's not really, you have to set yourself up to feel good.
You have to be on.
So I've been really prioritizing sleep. I've been really diligent about my nutrition. I think that that's something that's really, I know a lot of folks struggle with, but like when I'm in production meetings all day, or when we're filming, we film for like 10 hours straight. So like, I am just always really careful that when we have breaks, I use them to make sure I'm eating, to make sure I'm taking in enough water, I'm hydrating, I'm taking care of myself, because as soon as we're done shooting, I'm hitting the treadmill or I'm hitting the Cherry Creek bike path. Even when it maybe doesn't feel that exciting, it does always feel like a nice bookend to my day, but it has definitely gotten a lot harder. And I've reduced a bit of my training volume to help sort of allow this new project to take up more space in my life. I think, I experimented with not reducing my volume much, and that
sure did.
And that worked terribly.
Yeah, that was hard.
That was a bad call.
It's worth experimenting, though.
Yeah, but if you're crying on the treadmill twice a week, that's a sign.
Is that a red flag?
It's a big red flag.
Okay, just to be sure.
Yeah, as a coach, like, there was that's a sign.
We can draw a line in the sand there.
A big red line in the sand of like, if you're openly weeping at the gym, like, you need to have a talk with your coach. And that's part of my growth edge, is being more honest about where my limits are, because I tend to just think I can plow through things, and things that are hard, like shooting a TV show and running on the treadmill for an hour and a half, you can't just plow. You can't. Like, I am one of the toughest people I know, and I can't do it. And I shouldn't do it. Like, there's no benefit to that. That's not helpful for training. So this process has taught me a lot about planning ahead. On Sunday, I do a bunch of meal prep, and I make sure I have a lot of really easy to prepare food with me, so that I can make it in the studio, that I have balanced nutrition available. I'm really trying to get more protein in at breakfast, so I can front load my day more, because it's, when I've been working from home as a writer, you don't have to plan ahead quite as much. I'll just wander up to the fridge and there's usually like awesome athlete prepared meals there courtesy of TJ, so I can just ball out on like perfectly macro balanced meals. But now I have to sort of always be thinking 10 steps ahead. What can I do Sunday to make sure I feel good on Tuesday? What can I do on Monday to make sure I feel good on Wednesday for my workout? And so it's really been about prioritizing sleep, prioritizing nutrition, and learning to let things go. Learning that like if I start a workout and something doesn't feel right, it's okay to just run easy. That is a better choice than crying on the treadmill. I'm going to get asked to leave 24-hour fitness sooner or later. It's going to happen. I feel so bad for the guy at the gym there.
You should cry in the sauna. Like it's a
like a
more
normal person.
contained.
Okay, so the sauna,
Like
the
sweat.
reason I joined 24-hour fitness is because it's the cheapest place in Denver that also has a sauna. And every time I've gone, the sauna's been broken. And I'm starting to worry that the sauna isn't real and it doesn't actually work. And it was a trap and I've trapped myself.
Sorry.
But also, if you're crying, that means that you are not in a place to integrate heat stimulus into your training is also a thing I've learned.
Excellent awareness.
Thank you.
Excellent awareness.
Yeah. Weeping.
I agree.
Yeah. Weeping is your body's way of saying I'm not ready to sauna train. And like, I don't need to, I just like to sit in a warm box. That's nice. I love that. I'm already excited to do that in the future, but I've just had to really be flexible, which is something I suck at. I don't like being flexible. I want to be on, I want to feel good all the time, and that is not how a human life works.
Well, I
And
think a lot of people, that resonates with a lot of folks.
Yeah.
But I do think like your pathway to recognizing some of that came through getting back to the basics,
yes,
which is like what athletes should consider thinking about when new life stress is introduced. So work travel is a great example of that. It's like, what can I focus on? What can I control? Sleep, my sleep routine. I want to be very boundaried about that. Like, these are my sleep hours. I get ready for bed at 9. I go to bed at 10. I don't set an alarm. Like, I get up, like that's something that I've seen you do, like not setting that alarm is
that
really helpful.
I mean, that being said, I do have to set an alarm because I have to look pretty on camera. And
well, 2 days a week you have to set that alarm,
Yes.
but the other days you
yeah.
haven't been.
Yeah, but it's also, it's been tough. I'm really learning to fuel during my drives. I'm getting very good at making protein shakes to nosh on I-70 so that I don't bonk on the interstate. That's a bad call. But it really is about flexibility and planning, and those things are hard for me. Those are both in my growth edge.
But that's definitely where you are leaning into being gritty. And
yes. Yeah, because like I never,
flexibility.
right. Like I'm assuming I'm going to run a 100 miler in August or September of next year. And at no point was I ever like, oh, I need to take a break from training. Like as soon as I got the job, I texted my coach and we were so happy. And he was just like, all right, keep me in the loop about what this means for your training. Can't wait to get started on winter base building. And that's exactly how I felt, is like this, when things get hard, that's always when I excel. Like in races, like going into the night at Run Rabbit, I was like, this is my shit. Like the abyss is my best fucking friend. I have made peace with this darkness so many times. This is just a chance for me to party and for other people to see that I'm good at this.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And that's what I think about whenever I get on the treadmill at the fucking 24-hour fitness in Denver.
Stack those bricks.
I am friends with the abyss. The abyss is my friend.
Sometimes running on that treadmill does feel like running into the endless abyss.
Yeah.
It is not easy.
It's not my favorite.
So if you're going to summarize just, 3 or 4 key takeaways for any other athletes who are challenged by new life stress, but are also pursuing excellence and don't want to let go of their goals, but, know that good training is the best training you can do with taking into account your life circumstances, what would you recommend?
My takeaway would be loosen your grip, but never let go. You can soften yourself around some things, around your expectations, around your feelings, around your demands of yourself, but you do not let go of the things that excite you and make you you. And for me, that is running and that is performing. So I'm softening, but I'm not letting go.
stop, pause, rewind, listen to that again. I love that. That was nice.
Put it on a bumper sticker and pay me a royalty fee. So, you know, speaking of big goals, we've had a fun week because on last Saturday, while I was out on my long run and you were jamming on the treadmill because you are also friends with the abyss in your own weird little ginger way, you got selected for the Western States Endurance Run waitlist.
Yes, the
How did you,
waitlist, guys, the waitlist.
how did you feel when you found out?
I was like, okay, cool, it's a waitlist. But then somebody was like,
I got waitlisted at Yale.
That's a proud accomplishment.
And I did not go to Yale.
Well, you know, thank you, social media, because I would have never known, because they don't send you an email or anything.
No.
But a friend of ours, she tagged me in a post, "You're going to Western States." It was like, "You're definitely going to Western States." And I was like, "Oh, all right." So I looked at
actually, the way I found out is brand new micro coach, Zach Russell. Shout out to Zach, best guy on earth. Also, surround yourself with people who are hyped when you get into this shit. Like, that is the only way to live, is to have friends who are total nerds about this stuff. And when you get on the wait list for your dream race, they send you 100 text messages. Don't accept anything less in your life.
It's so funny because on the weekends, I really shut off. And I'm not like on social media. Like I focus on my training. I take some time for myself, keep my batteries charged. It's part of my process. And like if he hadn't texted me, I would have never went on social media, seen like, cause it was just so funny, man. It's just so weird. I looked at the past wait lists to see like, oh, how real is being 26 on a wait list to getting into one of the most popular races in the world. And I'm like, oh, they take up to 60 people for like the last 4 or 5 years doing this. I'm like, oh my God, like there's a 95% chance that I'm going to get into this thing. And so, you know, I thought immediately, well, other athletes are on wait lists. Like, what are the keys to dealing with training when you're on a wait list?
Yeah, I think it sort of goes back to one of the tenets that we always talk about here, which is the best way to get ready is to stay ready. That doesn't mean that TJ right now and every day is in the best shape of his life, ready to fire at Western States. It means that pretty much for most of his life, TJ is ready to jump in the kind of training that he would need to do to get ready for Western States. I cannot wait till the day of the Leadville lottery drawing, A, because I'm in it, and B, because we always get a surge of people who are like, hello, microcosm coaching. I have not run in 6 years. I usually walk my dog twice a week, and I just got into Leadville. Dear God, can you help me? And yes, we can. You are seen and heard, but like, shit's going to be hard for you. And there's, you know, the always maintaining a base and always maintaining some level of readiness is the best way that when it's your fucking day, you're ready. Like, set yourself up so that you can get lucky.
Yeah. You know, it's just practicing, you know, microcosm principles, but you know, this isn't exclusive to microcosm. Any good coaching is going to, you know, accentuate and highlight this in their philosophy in some way. But that consistency, maintaining a healthy amount of aerobic running volume in order to reinforce neuromuscular adaptations and doing the hill and stride work to maintain high outputs. Like, if you can do that in the spaces between your big races, you're pretty much going to be ready and you're going to have the foundation to step up your training. Where I see athletes like struggle is like they wait to get off that wait list before they actually commit.
You're training today. You went to the treadmill, dear God, with your little thing of electrolytes and your little thing of recovery shake. And you were like, I'm training for Western States today.
Yeah.
That was your mindset. And it is December 9th.
Right.
Why?
Because you've got to put the work in. I'm not going to wait to get off the wait list in May to start training.
Yeah. And to start not just training, but I think supporting your training with the high level of support that good training requires, right? Like when we're talking about making sure you're getting in that protein right after your long runs, making sure that you're fueling your long runs so that you set yourself up for the best chance of adaptation. I'm curious how you balance, like, again, it's December. This race is not until June. What is that balance of being prepared for the most competitive race of your life? How do you balance that with like today isn't like, you're not going full steam today.
No.
How are you thinking about turning up the intensity on your training when there is a small, but not, there's not zero chance that you won't get in?
Right.
How mentally are you approaching that?
The same way I would approach any other event. You know, you layer one brick on top of the next brick on top of the next brick. And I think it's really easy actually to get overly excited about something like
right.
this because it is Western States. Like this could be my only opportunity ever to run this race.
No,
Like I got on the wait list. I got on that with 2 tickets.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty lucky.
You should go buy a scratch off.
Yeah. But it was weird. Like I had a premonition that like this was for some reason, this was going to be the year. And then lo and behold, I don't know. It was really weird, but
well, send those vibes my way for Leadville. Lottery gods, if you're listening, I love you. Thank you for nothing that you've done for me in my life. Get me into Leadville, I guess. Do you a girl a favor?
You know, don't get overly excited because it's not like it's just keep putting the work in.
Right.
And that's kind of the thing that I've had going for me the whole time. You know, like I mentioned earlier, I've been working with my coach coming up on 6 years. That is a lot of time, week after week, month after month, year after year to be working for and towards an opportunity like this, knowing that eventually it would come. And it's like, you don't wait to hire a coach when you get into Leadville or Western States.
That's the wrong time to hire a coach.
You hire a coach because you want to be prepared for when you do.
Because you want to be the type of person that when your number gets drawn, you're ready to fucking go.
Yeah, and you want to be able to, you know, in order to do that, you need to set the foundation so you can have the best possible experience for you out there. And that's kind of my mindset right now. It's like, okay, how do I be prepared for a race? Well, I'm on the wait list. I won't know until May. Keep stacking those bricks, keep doing the small work, keep engaging in the habits and the routines that I need to have established to be successful months from now, 3 months from now, when training really kicks up. And, you know, keep the belief that I'm going to get in. I think there's a high likelihood I'm going to get in, but also, you know, I have a backup plan. I'm into UTMB as well, which is a sweet backup to be in.
Dang, you're having a great year.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But, you know, you don't wait to get into these great races to take action. You take action long before. You hold a vision for what you want your career to be long before. And then you do all of the daily actions and you repeat them over and over again 1,000,000 times until the opportunity comes. And then, you know, you hope to do your absolute best out there. And, you know, you've put that time in to ensure that you've stacked a lot of chips your side of the table.
Right. And again, this is one of those races where you are allowed and it's natural to have a strong attachment to the outcome, but it's also such an amazing way to recognize the way of being where it's not all outcome. Like whatever you get into Western States, you win Western States, you don't, like whatever you beat Jim Walmsley, greatest day of your life. You know,
that'd be something.
That'd be really something. Buy low, sell high, ladies and gentlemen.
0.01%.
You know, we don't have to put a number on it.
It's very low probability.
It's very low probability.
1 in 2 billion.
Yeah, let's just hope he stays off the Wahoo trainer. But there's always going to be another finish line. Like this, I don't think this would be your last time at Western States. Like you're still young by ultra runner standards, and there's always another finish line, no matter, even though there's some that really feel bigger. And like, I've been looking down when I was training for Western States, I felt like this is going to be the only big deal in my life that happens ever. And now that I'm a couple years out, I'm like, oh, you silly little 28-year-old, so cute. And I'm so glad that there's always another finish line. There's always another story to tell yourself about why this one matters most.
And that's why it's so key for athletes to have a vision for what they want to achieve and to have like a large time scale on that vision. If you're thinking 1 year, you're thinking way too zoomed in. You need to be, you know, and I say this all the time, if it was, you know, feasible to have a coaching business that, you know, asked athletes to commit to like 3 to 5 year signed contracts, I would freaking do that.
That's because, what our coach, to be clear, that is what our coach asked of us. He said he would only, or when he interviewed me for Swap, he said, I will only take you on if you're ready to work with me for 3 to 5 years.
That's what I committed to as well.
Yeah. And that's big coach energy.
Yeah, and that's how it should be, but it's also, we're not swap.
Right. But I'm just saying, like,
to be clear.
I like that approach. That really resonates with me. I would love to see the market increasingly gravitate towards that. And while I love all my athletes, the folks that have been with me for like 5+ years at this point are a very special group of people who really live the microcosm values and who really embody athletic excellence and excellence as a way of being. And I love getting to know them for that amount of time.
Yeah, hell yeah. But it's not just about like, okay, let's just do this because like they say that works. It's, have that and hold that vision because that is inherent and necessary
Yeah.
in the process of this goal leads to the next, to the next, to the next, which is a perpetual process of growth and learning. And when you think only 1 year, you're doing yourself a huge disservice because I see a lot of people, try to pack it all into 1 year as if that's the only year they're ever going to run. And then so many things happen as a result of that don't usually positively impact the process. And hopefully with good coaching, we can work with athletes to expand on their timelines. But, I would say one of the things that, you mentioned earlier, which is just so critical for where I'm at in this process, is that I always have like big spaces between big races.
Also, I don't think we dwelled on this enough that your backup plan for states is motherfucking UT. Like, you've been putting in so many years of work in this process that your backup plan for the biggest race in the world is the other biggest race in the world. And that is not an impossible place for all hardworking people to get to.
Totally. Anyone can do that.
Yeah.
I'm not special,
Yeah.
like I was a skier,
Yeah.
like,
yeah.
I've only been running for 10 years.
And that, like, it's when you really expand the timeline on your dreams, you really open up so many doors. And so I would just urge, like, it's not that you got lucky, and like luck is meaningless if you're not prepared. Like, again, you can have, the 50 lottery tickets in for Western states. If you're not doing the work, it's not going to matter. So it's all about consistently doing the work and then celebrating when you really get a chance to show off that work in a format that resonates with you.
Heck yeah. Well, I'm hoping to get all the ladies and the fellas back together for an epic
Team Stay Wet
2 crew event.
My favorite thing about Western States is we grew a group chat out of it for like my whole crew that supported me. And it's a group chat that will go dormant for weeks at a time. And someone will fire it up with like a dank meme, or like as soon as I found out TJ got into Western States, I fired it back up, and seeing how excited everyone gets for anytime anyone in the group chat is successful. Like, we have some marathoners in the chat. Shout out to Jonathan Levitt.
Peter
Bromka, like, we love celebrating. And Amelia came in third at Cascade Crest, I believe. Like, it's just this amazing little community that came out of my Western States experience that we now get to recycle into an amazing TJ Western States experience. And man, I want that for everyone. I just feel so lucky.
The double crew,
piping hot, stay wet.
All right, guys. Thanks for being with us on this longer than normal pod.
Hopefully we get to do more of these to follow your training for Western States journey.
Yeah. And maybe it'll have a different outcome than Leadville. We'll see.
Yeah, I hope so.
Less pukes, maybe.
Well, I can only propose to you once. So
that's true.
More pressure on you to make something cool happen.
Oh boy. You know how well I do under pressure.
Yeah.
All right, guys, if you've got feedback for a future call, if you're looking support in your running journey, give us a shout. We would love to hear from you. Microcosm-coaching.com and microcosmcoaching@gmail.com. Have a good one.